Today is August 10th, 2020, 5:05 p.m. Everyone in this call, it's Kyle DeSantis, Perry Verino, Jack Duncan, Stan Haywood, Eamon McEnany, Nick Haywood, and Maureen Durkin. If, Mrs. Durkin, if you would remember your husband's war and branch of service, what his rank was, and where he served.
He was a corporal in the Army. He served at Fort Devens, Camp Drum, Korea, and he was eventually discharged from Valley Forge Hospital in Pennsylvania.
Eamon, you're all good. Eamon, that's
go ahead.
I'm sorry. That was good. Eamon, you're all good to go with section 1.
All right. Okay. My first question is, do you remember like where you were living when your husband got like drafted or enlisted?
He was living in Brewster. He was the first. We weren't married then, and he was drafted in September 1950. He was discharged in January of 1953. So those were the years he served in the Army.
Do you remember maybe his encouragement or why he decided to join?
He didn't decide to join. He was drafted. He did not want to go in the Army. In fact, he was the first person in Brewster to be drafted. But he said after, it was a wonderful experience. He loved the men he met, and he didn't want to go, but he didn't regret it by the time he was out.
Do you like recall his first maybe day leaving to go, or like what experience it was like?
Yes, the men were called to Brewster Station, and the then Mayor, Henry Wells, saw the contingent off, and they went down to White Street, New York City. And that's where he was inducted. And then he was sent to Fort Devens in Massachusetts.
Did he tell you any memorable maybe like funny stories or moments or anything that he had when he came back, or maybe letters or something like that?
Letters that he wrote to me from Korea. They're very interesting reading. The interesting thing about him was that when he got to Korea, he was injured. He was not wounded. It was an accident. And that whole thing, if you've ever seen MASH, he was injured there and flown off in a helicopter and to a base hospital, then to a hospital in Japan, and finally to Valley Forge Hospital back here. But he wasn't in Korea long at all. I think he was 43 days there before he was hurt. And it was very interesting. I don't know if the Korean government, after he was discharged, we heard from them for they sent him medals, they sent him commendations, and I have them, letters of appreciation, things like that for his service. He was injured in a truck accident. Do you want me to go into the details?
Yeah, sure.
Well, it was very cold, and the trucks were going, he was in the combat engineers building roads, and the trucks were going up a hill, and they slipped gears, and there were 5 men sitting across the tail of the end of the truck. The truck ahead of them was coming down. They could see it was going to hit them. And Drew was in the middle, and the 2 on either side of him were able to jump off. He only could get halfway off, and one leg was crushed by the truck that was coming down. And then, as I say, they flew a helicopter in to take him out with his badly smashed leg. And he ended up in a hospital in Japan for a while. And then they flew him, as I say, over to Valley Forge Hospital. But he had wonderful experiences before he got there, going from where it was warm in Fort Devens, and then they sent them to Camp Drum, which is upstate New York, in the cold weather. And they did their winter goings on there. And it was very hard to get home from there, the roads being what they were then, and the weather.
What was it like knowing that like he was serving in the Army and you couldn't see him very much, only by letter?
Well, see, we weren't even engaged then. We were, quote, dating. But it was, for me, I was a history teacher once, and the letter is about Korea itself and how cold it was. And even going over, they went over to Korea by boat, and they packed them in like sardines. It was very crowded, and many of the men got very seasick, and they didn't know whether they were living or dying. They'd rather be dead. Go through it. They were very sick, a lot of them. He was just moderately so. He was lucky.
Do you remember any of what you said before about the his job, the job or the assignment?
Building roads.
Oh,
Yes, they were building roads in Korea. And it was very cold. The Army had a lot of good equipment. And this was just below the Punch Bowl, which was where the fighting was going on. And they often, once the road was built, it was to supplies, people moving. That was what they were doing. It was not very glamorous, but it was physically, he and all his companions were in very good physical shape. They certainly got a lot of exercise. And he didn't mind the Army rations. His mother was a terrible cook. And so the Army food tasted good to him.
That's the first person who said that on these interviews.
It didn't say much for his palate, perhaps.
I guess one of the two, or his mom's cooking, one of the two.
Next question.
oh, I'm done. Unless I can keep going.
Nikki disconnected. I'm just trying to make sure. if you want, I can ask a question to keep it going, and
You should.
when he rejoins, then
He could pick up when he gets back on.
okay. So I'm just gonna start off. Did he ever talk about how people entertained themselves over in Korea?
Not in Korea so much. He did in Fort Devens and especially Camp Drum. To fill out his contingent, there was the Tennessee National Guard was brought in to bring it up to numbers. And at night, all those men from Tennessee could get their radio stations back there, and they listened to country music every night. He wasn't a gambler, but he said there were a lot of card games and crap games that took place, and a lot of money changed hands. I think he was frugal and not too into gambling, so he didn't participate, but he certainly watched. They were very interested in mail. Of course, then, so many years ago, what is it, 70 years ago now, there was no cell phones or iPads or anything. So the written letter was very important, and important to those at home to get, and important to the soldiers to receive. Mail call was a big thing for them. And they formed friendships among themselves, and they traveled. I mean, to go from New York, they did not, where did they leave in California? Someplace they left to get the boat to go to Japan, to get to Korea. But they had time. They saw San Francisco. They did sightseeing. And these men, and certainly Drew, had never been to California before. So it was an interesting experience for him.
All right, Nikki, you're all good to take over. I believe you're rejoined.
Let him know what question you asked already.
Yes. Sorry. All right. So you asked about the time in war. I'm just gonna.
I've lost him.
You just refresh me what you asked, so I can.
I can't see
I'm sorry, my phone. I couldn't even.
Kyle, you should just continue. Nikki, maybe
Okay.
just take notes, or I'm not sure if you're taking
All right.
notes.
Can you hear me?
We can't really hear you unless
You're going in and out.
we're gonna just mute you, Nick, and Kyle will continue.
Do you have, or did he ever bring back any photographs of when he was on service or when he was?
he didn't even have a camera, but one of his buddies did, and he is still alive, and I still hear from him. And he sent lots of pictures and notes.
Can you recall the day when you found out, or if you found out when he was coming home, when his service was ended and he was discharged?
Yes, that was very easy because he was in Pennsylvania, and phone calls, and that was easy. the day he was discharged, which was in January of 1953, January 3rd. His mother was a more difficult day was when he was injured, and she received a call from the Army that he had been injured and his leg was injured. And then eventually a letter came to her from his buddy, his best buddy. And then when eventually when Drew was able to write and so forth, of course he wrote.
I know you alluded that he did have a close friend that's still alive today. Were there any other close friendships that he made when he was in service?
Yes, there was quite a band of them, and they about 5 of them, but they there's only one alive now. Drew, of the 5, just one's alive. Drew was the last one to die. 3 preceded him.
How long did he continue those friendships?
Till the day he died, till the day they died.
That was a lot of the questions I had. I'm going to work sorry for muting myself. I'm going to work on the wrap up now. What did he go on to do as a career after returning?
Just what he did before. Worked here in Brewster they started out with feed and coal, and then they went to oil, and now they're water and propane. Company's still in business. It's the 3rd generation now. But he worked very hard when he got home in building up the fuel business.
Did he ever attend reunions?
Yes, there was a man from Carmel who was drafted the same time, and they went to 2 reunions that I call in Tennessee, and they had a wonderful time. I did not go.
And the last question that I have, this interview has been on the shorter side. Some have been around an hour, but I like this length. Is there anything else that you would like to add that we have not covered so far?
No, I think you covered a great deal of things. I'd like to say that he had a very interesting Army career. He never wanted it, but he adjusted to it. People did adjust to things then, I think, more than they do today. And I think he instilled a lot of the values. He had great patriotism, which today is not the case as much. And I think he was very glad that he had the experience.
Thank you again for helping out with my project and for coming on for an interview.
You're very welcome. And if you have any other questions or anything, you have my phone number, and I'm accessible. And I have, as I say, it was impressive to me how the Korean government for a while just couldn't thank these men enough. And we're sending them all these memorabilia, towels with the Korean emblem and all that sort of thing. Well, it's all finished now, but for a long time after the Korean government. And as a point of interest, I don't know, but I don't think that war was ever ended.
No.
I don't think they have a an end to it. I don't think it was ever formally ended.
It's a ceasefire.
So Jack, they don't have an end.
No.
No, this was a ceasefire at the peace talks at the bridge in between the two countries.
So
It's
that
we're technically still at war. Any of the guys that serve in Korea today, up near the DMZ, are eligible for the VFW.
Mhm.
Mrs. Durkin, do you have any pictures of Drew in uniform?
You know, I have just very small pictures, and they're all in combat fatigue or their work. There no dress uniforms.
That's okay. That if we could get either get them for a day or two just to make copies and give them back to you, that would be great. Kyle could work that out with you, but we
All right.
want to put him up on a banner in the village, so we would like a picture that would be on the banner.
Well, I think that's very fitting and very nice. Very nice.
That's great.
We'll be in touch.
Okay. That's it?
That's it. You
That's it.
finished? I'm finished.
Are we finished, Kyle? Yes, we're all finished. Thank you very much for your time.
Nice to see you again. And
I'm here.
Jack has heard me say this. I am so impressed by the leadership of all you gentlemen. Those boys are so lucky.
Thank you very much. It's very
They
nice
really,
to hear.
I hope they appreciate it someday.
All right. Take care. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right.